I am the interim dean of the Schmidt College of Science and Technology. Yes. Everybody's very happy about science and technology, which is fantastic. With me tonight, of course, is Mackenzie Crigger. Oh, you? Yeah. All right. And so for those of you that haven't been to a Science on Tap event, the way that these work, Mackenzie and I are just going to chat for about minutes or so. I'm going to ask her a handful of questions. She will respond to those questions. We'll then take a break, allow people to do two things during that break. You'll have a chance to go refill your beers, and you'll have a chance to grab one of the note cards on the table in front of you and write a question on that note card. We'll collect those note cards during the break, and in the final part of Science on Tap, we'll go through those note cards and Mackenzie will answer your questions. If we choose your note card and Mackenzie answers your question, we'll give you a ticket for a free drink, which will have to be used tonight because it's only good at Science on Tap events, and this is the last one of this semester. So 3 parts, we'll talk, you'll ask questions, final part, we'll answer questions that you ask and give you a free ticket if we select your question. Before we get started, I want to make sure that I thank everybody for coming out tonight. This is really an amazing crowd. I have to say that when we do Science on Tap events around computational organic chemistry, we get a much smaller turnout. And so I don't know what that says about you as individuals, but it says something. So we're really happy that you're here tonight. We're happy that so many people are out to listen to Mackenzie, learn a little something about sustainability. So thank you all so much for being here. Also want to make sure that we thank all of our parent volunteers. Everybody that checked you in this evening is a parent of a current or past Chapman student, and we're really happy that they're sharing their time with us tonight. So thank you. And as always, a special thanks to Bonnie, who made the nachos in the corner for us. All right, so let's get to it. So really my pleasure to welcome Mackenzie Crigger here tonight. Mackenzie is unique among the other speakers that we've talked to this semester in that in addition to teaching at Chapman, she has a real job. And so we're particularly excited to get insight tonight. Mackenzie is the Sustainability and Energy Coordinator on campus. She'll correct that title when I give her the microphone, but that's close enough. And so we'll get started right away. And Mackenzie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do here on campus?
Sure. So can everybody hear me? My voice usually carries. So I'm the Energy and Sustainability Manager. So Dr. Keller was mostly right. And so that sort of means that anything on campus that has to do with energy management, water management, waste management, any sort of sustainability curriculum. I do some educational programming for faculty and staff and students. Yeah, anything in that genre, my finger is in at some point. I do a lot of work with our new construction, sometimes more or less successfully, depending on the construction project. Yeah, so very wide swath of duties, and every day is different. When the drought was a major concern, I spent a lot more time thinking about water than I spent thinking about trash. Right now, because we have new organics legislation coming in, I spend a lot more time digging through the garbage. My students will tell you, they're like, what are you doing? Why are you digging the trash?
You're doing great. We're going to knock this out of the park. It's going to be so good. All right, so I think what I'd like to ask next is if you can dive into a couple of the specifics. So you sort of talked about some general things. We think about water, we dig through trash. What are some specific projects that you've worked on and completed, or some specific projects that you're engaged in right now around sustainability and energy on Chapman's campus?
Sure. So one thing that I always really like to talk about when I get to talk about the work that I do, but it also really showcases the good work that some of the students on campus also do. Our campus palette now is almost 75% native or California friendly or drought tolerant. That is a huge upswing from just 3 or 4 years ago when it was barely 25% was California friendly or drought tolerant. We were able to make all of those changes in large part because of a survey that the Environmental Science and Policy capstone students put together and sent out, and spent a lot of time hounding their friends, their staff, the staff that they knew, faculty members that they knew, to ask them to answer these questions. And that, in turn, reduced our water consumption by 75%, which is no small feat on our campus. If you've been to our campus, you see it's very beautiful, it's very green, it's very lush. So finding a way to keep that campus aesthetic while also still reducing our water consumption was a really big challenge. I spend a lot of time on energy management. We spend about $5 million a year in energy. Yeah, I feel that every time I see our monthly utility bills come in. But a couple of the things that we've done, just by having added a new science and engineering building, which our engineering center is coming, and a new performing arts center, and we have a new residence hall coming on, we've actually managed to reduce our energy consumption by 2% while still adding these buildings. A lot of that is from retrofit projects, retro commissioning. So when we retro commission a building, we basically go through the whole building and make sure that the mechanical systems are operating the way that they're supposed to. Lots of times when a building, after a building's been built for a couple of years, things happen. Someone complains that they're cold, someone complains that they're hot, a valve gets turned off here or not turned back on over there, and before you know it, the system isn't working the way it's designed, and we end up with the building sort of fighting itself, which takes a lot more energy. If you have one person that's complaining of being cold and another person complaining that they're hot, if those systems aren't working together well, then we just spend a lot more money and energy than we should. So when we retro commission a building, we go through that whole building and make sure that those systems are actually working together and not against each other. One of the biggest buildings on campus, Beckman, students continually complain and staff complain. They're always cold. They're uncomfortable. So we spent several years trying to figure out the problem in that building. We spent probably $10,000 on air balancing the building because we're like, oh, maybe it's because the space is over conditioned. Turns out it was over conditioned, but that wasn't the biggest problem. When the building was originally built, the temperature controllers that are in the ducts were not synced with our energy management system within our building. So ours is ALC. They were synced with Johnson Controls. They have a different delta, and so it was reading the wrong temperature in the space and so someone would call for cooling and they would actually get heat, or they would call for heating and they would get cooling. So you can see why people were cold. But it's through projects like that we see, oh, this is something that was missed. This was something that just wasn't done properly as part of our construction project. And sometimes it's years later when we figure that out. But hopefully once we figure it out, everybody's more comfortable, everybody's happier. And the biggest thing that we have coming this semester, and it probably won't roll out on our campus. It'll roll out on the Rinker campus in a couple of weeks, but on our main campus, it won't roll out until the summer. But we are rolling out composting. So those of you that are familiar with California legislation, you know that composting is now required from any organization that produces over 4 cubic yards of trash per week. We produce way more than that. So yay, composting is coming. And the education piece that is around composting is really difficult because each waste management provider has its own restrictions, its own regulations. So what works on our Rinker campus won't necessarily translate to something that works on our main campus. But the advantage of having the Rinker campus is it's smaller. We can test some things. We can see what sort of signage works. We can see what sort of information works. We can see where the pressure points are and the things that people don't understand or the things that people don't like, and really hopefully fine tune those before we roll it out over here.
Yes, so that's plenty. Good job. All right, so I think one of the things that I hear in that is that the title of tonight's conversation is something like Your Sustainable Home. And I think that has this sort of very rainbows and unicorn feel to it. But when I hear you talking, you're talking about percent savings and $5 million budgets and trying to trim 2% off of $5 million budgets that has huge impacts and data gathering. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we bring those two things together. How do you think about what the word sustainability means? And in particular, how are you able to approach that idea with this sort of quantitative rigor and statistical rigor that you bring to that space?
Yeah. So the person that I report to really cares a lot about numbers, and their boss really, really cares a lot about numbers. Our CFO I mean, he is not warm and fuzzy. I can be like, this is a great idea and we should do it because it makes us feel good. And he's like, yeah, but how much does it cost? So I spend a lot of time looking at like quantitative data to figure out, do our projects actually work? But the flip side of that is that I have to be able to tell a really good story, because you can give people a ton of numbers and they just sort of zone out. But if you can tell them a compelling story that helps them understand why an energy efficiency project makes good sense, or why we should be focused on composting when the impression is that composting is smelly and stinky. But when I say, hey, we're going to get fined, or from a legislative perspective, it looks really bad if we're not doing this, then it really helps that, everybody thinks, oh, sustainability, it's this really nice, fluffy, wonderful thing, and you should just do it because it's, it's good for the planet, and you should go out and hug a tree. And I mean, you should. I'm in favor of that. I'm surprised one of my coworkers isn't here, like, with a question like, how many trees have you hugged today? Because that's a regular question that I get. But at the same time, like, it doesn't matter if the project feels good or if the project is something that that we should be doing just because it has a nice story. It actually has to make financial sense. And if I didn't spend a whole lot of time gathering data and installing meters and digging through trash and actually like weighing our trash to say, you know what, you think that organic waste isn't a problem in this building? Well, I just weighed your trash and it has 500 pounds of organic waste in it. True story. That's from one meal period. So when you're able to start having those discussions, it makes putting together a really aggressive sustainability plan possible. When I wanted to install a food digester and no one in the U.S. had one, my boss was like, well, this seems like a really dicey idea. And in retrospect, there are times where I'm like, this was so stupid. Why did we do this? But at the same time, when we're generating 500 pounds of food waste per meal period, it's not that much anymore. We've done a lot of work. So it's down to about 100 pounds in a cafeteria that feeds, 1,200 students a day. About 1,200 students a day. That's pretty good. But if I don't have actual hard data that says this is why we need to do this, it doesn't matter. I can say, I need $150,000 for this project, but this is what we're going to get for our money. So hopefully, yeah.
So I just want to go on camera as saying that since the CFO also controls my budget, I think that this person is perfectly warm and fuzzy. And we appreciate your support in the sciences. So I think, Mackenzie, this sort of quantitative rigor that you talk about in your role is something that you bring to the classes that you teach for the Environmental Science and Policy program. It was like, come on, what? You're all here for the Environmental Science and Policy program. Lee. Thank you. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about how you involve students in your work. Sort of, you've talked a little bit about the survey that they did around sort of vegetation on campus, but how else are you connecting students to what you're doing on campus? And sort of what are the opportunities for those students once they leave Chapman?
So the capstone course, historically, we've always done an on-campus audit. The first year that this class was offered, the faculty members that were teaching it showed up at my door and said, hey, do you have any projects that our students could work on? And I was like, how much time do you have? I'm an office of one. I've got more than enough projects for folks to work on. And so they were able to do, they basically looked at 10 areas on campus. So energy, waste, water, construction, procurement, curriculum, transportation. And through these projects, because again, I'm an office of one, but when we have a classroom full of students that are engaged in this type of research and interested in what energy management or waste management looks like on our campus, when they have the opportunity to have some practical application with what they're doing and with the skills that they're learning in our class, and then I'm able to actually take that research and turn it around and say, hey, yeah, these 3 things aren't going to work because we don't have the money to do it, but these 10 will, and we should do these projects. at least for me, it's great when I see our students come back and I say, hey, you know what? You remember that survey that you did? Because you did that survey, we now have composting on our campus. Or, because we did that survey, we were able to transition all the lighting in our residence life complex to LED lighting. That's no small thing. The students have helped us save a ton of money, and they've enabled us to do a lot more work than what my office alone can do. And I have student staff members that work for me. I have typically I have about 4 or 5 student staff members, and they really they're the ones that run our Green Department certification program, and so they actually learn how to go out and audit a space and help provide people with really practical things that they can do within their office space on our campus to really help the university be more sustainable. And we have several alum that are here tonight, and one just started her first day at P2S, and so, woo! And, to see our students go out and excel and be able to put the skills into practice that they have learned, at least for me, that's really gratifying. And so I know that the things that we're doing in this program and on this campus are really powerful, and they're changing the way that the world works and the way that people think about sustainability, and hopefully they're raising the profile of the university as a whole.
All right, awesome. So again, to the CFO, that's right, environmental science and policy has saved this university literally millions of dollars. And so we appreciate any kickbacks that you care to send to Schmid College of Science and Technology. So Mackenzie, not all of us are going to have a $5 million energy bill. And so I think that one of the things that I'd like you to start talking about, and I suspect we'll get questions about this on the cards during the break, is how do we transition some of what you've done on sort of a really big campus with a big operation, with an army of students to help you get this data? How do we translate some of that to our homes, to our operations, which are much smaller? Are there things that we can be doing or things that you're doing off of campus that move towards these same goals of energy and water and waste efficiency?
Yeah, absolutely. So as some of you know, the university owns about 80 to 100 homes around campus. One of the things that we've done is that when we do a renovation on any of those homes, the landscape that goes in is native, California friendly, drought tolerant, and slowly we're going back through and trying to transition some of those that had previously been renovated into a more native, California friendly, drought tolerant landscape. And that's something that everybody can do at their house. Like, you don't have to rip out all of your flowers. You don't have to rip out all of your landscaping, but there are ways to go through and make really strategic changes that really reduce your energy or your water consumption outside your home. If you live in an apartment complex, there are tons of things that you can do that you think, oh my gosh, like I don't have the ability to change the landscaping here, but you may have the ability to compost. Most apartment complexes, because they're multifamily residences, are going to be required to offer composting services to the folks that live in those buildings. There are organizations that are mobile that will come by and collect your compost, or you can drop it off at the farmers market in Orange. We now collect compost there. And small things like setting your thermostat so that in the summer it doesn't get any cooler in your house than 78 degrees. Like, you come into a house and it feels, you're like, oh my gosh, it's 95 outside. If you come into your house and it feels 78, like, that's cooler. And the same thing in the winter. You don't need to crank your thermostat up to 85. Put on a sweater. Get a cat. They love to snuggle. I've got 3. You can have one of them. No, I'm just kidding. I can't. Yeah, go hug a tree. But it's the really, really small things that you do. Like, personally, I've really tried to reduce all the waste that I produce, and I've just taken small things in my life. I'm like, okay, how am I going to make my laundry situation completely zero waste? It took some work. I've done it. Now how can I make my dental routine completely zero waste? It's another one that's hard. When you can find some sort of mouthwash that is not in a plastic container, please, someone send it my way. But I think that's how you really start to change your behavior and really start to have some things that are actionable, that aren't overwhelming. So when I think you don't have to have a ton of money to do this. Most of sustainability measures came around originally because people were trying to save money. And a good friend of mine, she was like, she grew up in a, she's one of 13 children, and so there's nothing extra in that house. And she was like, my parents were the most like sustainable people I knew because we had to reuse everything. And so I think if you just sort of have a mind shift that, there is no output, everything is food. So either you need to be able to reuse it somehow, or you need to be able to compost it, or recycle it, then it changes everything. It changes how you shop. It changes how you live your life. It changes the decisions that you make. Like I hardly ever get takeout anymore because what am I going to do with this like styrofoam container? Oh no, I'm going to have to go and sit in a nice restaurant and enjoy my meal there. Oh, darn. That's terrible. I'm not, like, sitting on the floor eating, like, shooing the cats away from my dinner. Oh, no. And luckily I found some really nice lifestyle changes that have accompanied that. And there's some nice mind shifts that have happened, too, that have... even while I was trying to make decisions that were more sustainable that I thought were good for the planet, they've actually been good for my mental state and my psyche. So not to be too tree hugger up here, but.
Okay, so I think we're about at the halfway point. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a quick break. Go ahead and refill your glasses. And any questions you have now that you have a sense of what Mackenzie's all about, go ahead and write those on the note cards, and we'll collect them and answer a handful in the second part of tonight. Okay, so lots of questions up here. Thanks for your patience as we sorted through these. We are not going to be able to get through the ginormous stack that we have, but we will make as much progress as we can. And I'm sure Mackenzie would be happy to answer all of your questions for you, even if we don't get to them on the cards. So we'll get to it, and we'll see how far we can get through here. All right, so first card that I have. Can you give an example of a project you thought would positively impact the campus, but did not? Whose question was that? All right, so right over here for the drink ticket. All right, go for it. And the answer is probably just no, right? No.
I thought that this was a really great question because it really highlights one of the challenges that we have with sustainability. So when we put in our first 4 EV charging stations, they were so hotly used and so widely used that while people were glad we had them, we realized how quickly that we did not have enough capacity. And so while it wasn't necessarily that it didn't impact the university positively, it just sort of created this culture of people like skulking around the EV charging stations or calling me being like, this person has been parked here for 3 minutes longer than they're supposed to be. Can you have them towed? I'm like, no, I can't have them towed. But ultimately, because we had, Walter's like, I never asked you to tow anyone. Much. But what it really did highlight was that we really had so much further to go. We're like, 4 charging stations, that'll be great. We're up to 68 now, and they're all fully utilized almost all the time.
And for students in the audience, that's how you take a negative question and turn it into a positive. So there's some nice interview tips coming out of this as well. Okay, so next question. So when you are working, teaching, and learning, how much do you think about word choice, communication strategies, and previous knowledge? And how do those things really impact the outcome of your work in sustainability? Whose question is that? All right. Environmental Science and Policy alumna, Kyoko.
That is such a good question. I use a lot of language that, in hindsight, I realize that other folks don't necessarily understand because they're not so steeped in this work or in this language like I am. And so I really do sort of have to rewind and say, oh, wait, okay, let me just make sure that when I'm sending out to the wider campus community actually makes sense for other people, because I could be providing really great information, but if it's not written in a way that people understand, it's going to go nowhere. So I've started sending any email that I'm sending out to the wider campus to one of my coworkers. He's one of our project managers, and I'm like, hey, do you understand what this says? If he says no, then I'm like, okay, what is confusing? If he says yes, I'm like, okay, great. The majority of the campus is going to understand this. But it also really becomes important too when I think about the sort of curriculum that we offer for when we just recently did a program called Menu for the Future, and it really looked at what how food choices are impacted not only by socioeconomic status, but also from a sustainability perspective. And just going through that and talking with folks on campus that are coming from a wide variety of space on campus, realizing that people don't have the connection to sustainability that I do has really caused me to shift in how I communicate sustainability initiatives. So instead of telling people that you have saved this much carbon by doing by letting us do this LED project in your dorm room, I found that it's much more effective to say, by doing this project, we've removed X number of vehicles from the road, or it's equivalent to planting this number of trees. Because telling people in tons of carbon, I mean, does that make any sense? Like, no, I mean, it does to me, but I mean, I have this vision of a carbon cube in my mind, and I get that not everyone has that. But that, for me, that has been one of the biggest challenges. I'm not a communications specialist. I do have a student worker that's working for me right now who is a communications major, and it has been so great. I'm sad to lose her because I do think that that's a space where sustainability in general struggles.
Okay, next question. So CR&R and Waste Management Republic are the major environmental services, the trash hauling companies in Orange County. What would you like to see them doing or doing more of to get more on board with helping the planet? Whose question is that? All right, we're here.
So I work with all three of those organizations really regularly. CR&R is our provider on campus. We have Republic at our Residence Life facility in Anaheim, and we have Ware Disposal and Waste Management at our Rinker campus. All three of those organizations, with varying degrees, have really stepped up their response to sustainability issues. When I've been trying to roll out our composting program, Ware Disposal has been great. I can call Jeff Snow, who's the vice president at Republic, and say, hey, I've got this challenge. I've got this weird thing I need to recycle, and he will try his darndest to find a way for me to do it. And it's been over the course of several years that I finally have developed a really good working relationship with CR&R. During our move out, they are crucial for helping us recycle things and get things moved as quickly out of our dorm space as I can. But again, it is an evolving process. And now, because there's more regulatory pressure on those organizations, they've really, just even in the last 6 months, have stepped up their game, been providing more information, and have really been focused on helping the consumer actually achieve this goal, and instead aren't necessarily being punitive like they've been in the past. They'll say, okay, this is an education problem. It's not something that we're going to fix by fining you. We clearly need to give you more education about what's happening on our side, so then that can help you be a better recycler, a better composter, better manager of your waste management. The one thing that I wish that they would all do is give me actual tonnage information. We just had a discussion about how I have no actual idea what the average weight of one of our bins that leaves our campus is. I've offered to pay them just to run a truck for our waste and our recycling for one day, and unfortunately no dice. But that's the one thing that I would like to see. I'm like, can you put a scale on our bins so that I know exactly how much trash and recycling and soon to be composting is actually leaving our campus?
Okay, this one I suspect is from a science student. How can researchers limit plastic waste and still stay sterile? I see lots of single-use plastics, pipettes, droppers, those sorts of things in labs during my time at Chapman. Whose question is that? All right, it's not from a student. Ashley Welpe, our lab manager, totally knows it.
Oh my gosh, this is such a hard question. It's something that Karen Swift and I have been tackling for years, and unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. Aside from, hopefully new products are being developed that are either more compostable, but then again, you run into the trouble with with compostable plastics, and it's just, there's no good answer yet. But I will keep an eye out. And if you see anything that looks amazing, please let me know. But that's a good thing to think about. Like, when we think about how much we consume in normal course of business, like, you're doing research, you're doing experiments, you're trying to solve problems, but having a cleaner way to solve those problems would be great. So someone invent that, please. That would be great.
Okay. So is it true that on top of being the sustainability coordinator for campus and teaching an amazing capstone course, you're also a PhD student? How is so much awesomeness possible? And can you tell us a little bit about your dissertation topic? Whose question is that? With some embellishment from me.
Yeah, so that is true. I like to be busy. That's really all I know to say. But in terms of my dissertation, my research looks at climate migration and how climate change forces people and populations to move. Specifically, I'm looking at what's happening in the Marshall Islands. You may or may not know it's one of the most climate at-risk populations on the planet. The highest point on any of their islands is 10 feet. There's an average of about 3 feet, like across all 27 atolls. So a 3-foot sea level rise is really problematic. Not only are you losing a culture, not only are you losing land, you're losing language, you're losing, I mean, it's basically, you're decimating a whole people. And if the communities don't stay together, then, you know, their way of life completely disintegrates. And so how do you move a whole community? Should you try to move a whole community? Do they even want to be moved? The answer is no, they don't want to be moved. I wouldn't want to leave the Marshall Islands either. It's beautiful. But the sort of the way that I fell into that research area is because I spent so much time giving people data about what climate change does, and this is what 3 feet of sea level rise looks like. This is what 2 degrees Celsius of temperature rise looks like, and people don't understand that. But I found that when you talk to people about what's happening to other people, they understand that. And my hope is that through that type of research, it causes people to change their actions so they realize that the things that they do are impacting people around the world.
All right, next one. This is from Adam Frey. Who's Adam Frey? All right, Adam. All right, what was the turning point in your life that led you to pursue a career in sustainability?
I don't really think that there was just one point in my life. I'm originally from Eastern Kentucky, a small town in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. Whoop, whoop, yay! Super proud to be from Appalachia, but my grandfather owned a coal company, and very, very early on, I started to see the decimation that caused. We have watershed problems. It's nothing uncommon to see a creek that's been horribly polluted. I grew up being able to hike in the woods and climb off my horse and drink out of the stream, and that's not really the case anymore. But again, when I was a kid, I just got really interested in sustainability and environmental management. I was building solar ovens in my backyard. I always thought I would go to law school and be an environmental attorney. And then after working in a law firm for several years, and I worked for one of the attorneys for Ashland Oil, who, it was a great learning experience. But I realized very quickly that if I were going to be an environmental attorney, I was not going to be able to make the changes that I wanted and make any money. So I went to business school because I realized that if you can convince a business to do something that saves them money, then they were going to do it, regardless of whether or not it was good for the planet. So.
Okay, so this one's about education. Have you reached out to Chapman's education department to talk about curriculum development in sustainability for elementary school level students?
So I haven't actually, which is ironic because my PhD program is in the College of Ed, so I probably should have done that. So who asked this question? Oh, yeah. So probably should have done that. But I have talked with the leadership program there about developing some sort of curriculum that really brings together sustainability and leadership and environmental management and leadership and what sort of skills we need to be teaching professionals that want to work in this field. But I will be at the career day for Orange Elementary School this week. So if anyone has good suggestions of things to do with third graders, I'm all ears.
Third graders love digging through trash. You can put them to work for you. All right, so just a couple more and then we'll wrap things up. So last one is a pretty specific question. Why doesn't Chapman have its own power plant?
So, how many of you know how old Chapman is? Ooh, yeah. 150 years old. ish. We have about, I think it's 11 historic buildings on campus. Yeah. So we actually looked at putting in like a mini chiller plant in the basement of Doty Hall when we were doing that construction. There was about a 60-year payback period. I can't get equipment that lasts 60 years, so that really doesn't seem like a good investment. And so for us, it would cost so much to do all of the infrastructure work that is required to put in our own power plant or our own cogen plant. We've done a lot of research into what that could look like. The problem for us also is that we don't have a way to use the steam that's generated from that. Again, we have package units on all of our buildings, and so just the infrastructure requirement is so substantial. And plus, I'm not sure that Old Town is going to let us build a power plant. I have a feeling that people will not be happy about that. I'm just going to throw that one out there.
All right, whose question was the PowerPoint question? I just stole some beer from somebody. Who asked that one? All right, over here. Yeah. Okay, good. And we'll do one more, which I think is a great one to end on. So, what is your wildest sustainability dream for Chapman? Whose question is that? Oh, yeah. Piper, such a softie. Yeah. All right.
So my wildest sustainability dream is that we get to net zero, like net zero carbon, net zero water, net zero waste. That's a tall order, but there is a student group on campus that also has that same goal. So I'm hoping that as they go out into the world and learn about new technologies and things that can help us, I hope a lot of that knowledge trickles back to the university. We can find a way to actually make that happen. There's some cheaty ways that we could get to doing that. You know, we could buy carbon credits to offset all of our utility bill expense. You know, but that's a tall order. But I think that that's like the ultimate goal. And you know, my hope is that we can start with making one building net zero and then just sort of build that out. But it's a tall order, but hopefully one day it can happen.
All right, and so with that, let me wrap some things up here with some thank yous. I want to thank the Schmid staff that makes this event happen. So Sarah Buckley, Elisa Hernandez, Adina Hamlin. This entire semester-long series has run incredibly smoothly for those of you that have been here at other events, and the three of them are just instrumental in making this happen. So thank you so much for the staff for making this happen. Thank you again for our parent volunteers who not only trust us with their children, but give us their Monday night. We appreciate both of those things, so thank you so much for being here. Thanks to Chapman Crafted for giving us a place to host this event and giving us beer to drink. Thank you to Panther Productions for making us look and sound awesome, as the saying goes. And finally, I really do want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank you for the community members that have supported this event and come out to these things. Thank you to the Chapman staff and faculty that are spending their Monday night back close to campus, learning a little bit more about their colleagues. And tonight, I really want to thank all of our students and all of our alumni for being here. We appreciate you being here with us on the Monday night. So thank you all. That wraps up our... That wraps up our 2019 Science on Tap series. We will look forward to seeing all of you in the fall. I am going to make one final request. If you are a Chapman Environmental Science and Policy student or Environmental and Science and Policy alumni, I need you up front for a picture. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight.